Have you ever wondered what makes a really good and hateable villain in a movie or television show? And are you also in need of a recommendation for a movie that has a hateable villain? Well, I've got the movie for you here today that I think features one of the most hateable villains I have ever seen on screen, and I am going to break it down here in this film analysis. Welcome to my channel, Film Obsessed, where I talk about everything that I love in the world of movies and television. With today's video, we are discussing the 2010 film 13 Assassins, a movie that I've always scrolled by on streaming and never gave it a chance, but some research and my love for Japan and samurais finally made me cave, and I watched it for the first time, and wow, what a surprise. Just as a general short review of it, I loved it. I've been on a good binge of consuming Japanese and samurai-related media lately. Shogun was one of the last things that I watched, and it might be one of my all-time favorite things that I've ever seen. I saw so many parallels within this movie from that show in terms of the world building and exploring the cool aspects of the samurai. From a story perspective, this movie might be more grittier, darker, and also unsettling as something like Shogun. The story follows this group of 13 assassins who are trying to stop a corrupt and violent feudal lord from taking up the mantle of shogun who will put everyone at war in Japan. Regarding the 13 assassins, I never really got that attached to them individually, given the story doesn't really allow them the time for us, the watcher, to really get attached to each of them. The only three I felt any attachment to were the main guy Shinzaman, his cousin, and then Hirayama. That dude just has a very badass presence to him when he's not in action, and then when he is actually fighting people. I already mentioned the villain, Lord Naritsugu, but I'll talk about him more here in a second. Finally, to close up this small review, I have to give massive props to the action and production design. This was top-tier filmmaking and action choreography put to the screen that really hits someone like me. I've always said that my number one rule for shooting action is that it must be, for the most part, in camera or have an authentic feeling to it. The ending was maybe my only big criticism of the movie, and I wasn't really much of a fan of a couple of things there with the characters and how they go out, but overall, this was a very fun experience. Now, let's get to the aspect that you've all been waiting to hear me talk about, which is, of course, the villain, Lord Naritsugu, who I think, as I said already enough, is an extremely hateable dude, and in my opinion, there are two types of great villains. Ones that you understand what their goal is, even though you're not supposed to agree with it, and that they think what they are doing is correct, and then the other one that does extremely despicable acts that make you hate them so much that you want them to die. An example for this first type of villain can be someone like Thanos from the MCU. You understand his motivations for the things he's trying to do because he really believes that he's doing the right thing, but deep down, he is still someone our heroes have to stop. Naritsugu fits in with that second type, and it all comes down simply to his despicable actions and words. Let's start at the beginning, because the movie wastes absolutely no time getting you introduced to the kind of person that he is. It is basically told through other lords that he is very despicable and wants a war-torn Japan if he becomes shogun. Through this narration, you get scenes of him doing these despicable things that these lords speak of. In one of those scenes, he takes the wife of a man named Makino by force and rapes her. Once the husband finds out and comes to her aid, the lord kills him in brutal fashion, taking his sweet time as he chops his head off. When the wife sees this happen, she is so distraught at the two things that she just experienced, and it pushed her to commit suicide. In another instance, a man in his own clan once described the lord as despicable and evil, giving him the name Harakiri to protest. Naritsugu took that man's family into his yard at his home and used them as target practice for archery, including the children. I can't begin to describe how disgusted I was watching this, because it is not something I'm used to seeing, and usually that is the kind of reaction that you get from witnessing those kinds of things. On top of that, what made it worse is the fact that the lord himself was getting pleasure out of doing it. He wasn't just doing it for the sake of doing it. He is a character that lusts for this kind of thing. He actually enjoyed killing those people, all because someone described him as evil, which, to be clear, is true. We aren't even done yet, because there was another instance that took place after these two, and it actually was something that happened in front of our characters for them to witness. For the last two events I read out, those were said through a narration that our main characters had to listen to through word of mouth. But this time, they actually had to witness firsthand in front of them just how brutal this lord was. So basically, the story is this. The feudal lord put really terrible land taxes on starving peasants, and the peasants revolted. In response to that, he took the peasant leader's daughter and cut off all her limbs from her arms to her legs and also cut out her tongue as well. A despicable act of violence that the way they show it on screen, again, is so unsettling and it makes you squirm. I have no idea, by the way, if this was a real person or if they did it through visual effects to make it look like she doesn't have her arms and legs. That's besides the point though, because the actual act of him doing this to this woman is so vile that it is all you as the watcher need to be invested in wanting to see that dude be dead. Subsequently, it is also enough for our main character Shinzaman to be fully in on the plan to go and assassinate him. So that is my breakdown for why he is as hateable as he is. He comfortably fits into that category of how to write two really good kinds of villains. I'll be curious to know if anybody here watching this shares my thoughts on that. Also, let me know in your mind who you think the most hateable villain in all of film history is. Drop it down below in the comments. Now, the villain wasn't the only thing that I wanted to talk about with regards to this film analysis. I also wanted to talk about the action because, as I mentioned earlier, the action in this film does what all action movies should do. I have already collectively decided that there is a good chance that I'm going to be watching that entire third act sequence on repeat for a very long time. It's something to learn from, and if an action sequence can get you to think that way, then you know they did something right. For the majority of the movie in the first and second act, it's mainly all a build-up to the third and final act, which is 40 to 45 minutes of just pure action, and there is not a single moment of rest for you to take a breath. The 13 assassins corner the feudal lord in a village where they can stand their ground and trap him. The set pieces that they created out of this are so impressive. If you go online and you look up photos of the shoot, you can see that they actually went to a real location and practically built an entire village from scratch to create these set pieces. It is visually a work of art and masterful in every sense of the word with regards to the production design. There's no green screen, there's no volume, and no visual effects in this entire 40 to 45 minute sequence. It is bare bones, knuckle to knuckle, sword on sword, action between the assassins and the army under the feudal lord. I believe the number is 200 under him, by the way, which makes sense for why it was as long as it was, because these 13 guys had to go through every single one of them, and they could not let one live. Every moment where these 13 were in action, it just feels so real, as if you're actually watching the swords hit the bodies of these actors, drawing blood and actually dying. I have to give massive credit to the director for making it look as real as it did. I was never once bored during this fight, and I didn't think it overstayed its welcome because I was so invested given everything surrounding it. Unfortunately, as you know if you've watched the movie already, not all 13 assassins made it out, and there was just no way that every single one of them was going to survive that, and I do like that that's how it ended up going. The only one who ended up surviving was the cousin to our main character. It is a bit cliche that that is the way it goes, given I feel like I've seen a lot of stories do this kind of thing, where it's the older member of the family who dies and the younger one lives on to tell the tale. This actually leads to one of my criticisms of the ending, where you actually have the final fight between Shinzaman and Naritsugu. I thought this was going to be a lot more proper of a fight, but in actuality, it only lasted not even 2 minutes. Shinzaman let himself get stabbed, and in doing so, he somehow also manages to stab Naritsugu, who kind of just takes it as well and then turns into a whiny bitch as he's dying. Admittedly, I do think this ultimately led to a more satisfying death to his character. The man is literally crawling and begging for his life, when before, in the rest of the film, he acted all tough and mighty, thinking he was better than everyone else. In actuality, he was none of that stuff, and so when his head is sliced right off, I felt every bit of satisfaction from it. Again though, I do kind of wish there was something more to their fight between each other, given how it was even being built up. I was also not a fan of the fact that the one dude that our group of assassins comes across before they reach the village is seemingly alive at the end after getting stabbed in the neck. I can't quite tell if it's a hallucination from the cousin, who is the last one left alive, but I'm just not quite sure that was even put in there to begin with, and I kind of think it would have been better if they just left that out. All in all, when it comes down to the rest of the film, I am thoroughly impressed by what I saw, and again, I was very surprised. I went into this movie not really knowing much about it with regards to the plot and whatnot. All I knew is that it was taking place in Japan and involved samurais. I also came to learn after seeing the movie that this is actually a remake of a much older film from the 1960s of the same name. Now, I won't lie, I don't know if I will go and watch that original film because having seen the remake, I'm also more inclined to think that this is just the better version and that that one is not worth my time. To be clear, that's no disrespect to the original. I just think that this new version is every everything that I could hope for and want. It's by no means a perfect film, as you heard me say with some of my criticisms. It is a little slower at the beginning, and I wasn't a fan of the few things at the ending, but the rest of it is really good filmmaking and entertainment, along with a script that writes one of the most hateable villains that I've ever seen. I'd be very curious to know if anyone here watching has seen both versions and can speak to how they compare to each other, so let me know down below in the comments what you think of that. So there you have it, my film analysis of the 2010 remake 13 Assassins. Seriously, I can't recommend this movie enough to people if they haven't seen it already. It is a hidden gem that I don't think a lot of people know about, given just by looking at the box office numbers, it did not have a good enough release domestically and was mainly put in Japan. So again, definitely recommend to people, especially if you are someone like me who has seen it. What do you all think? Leave your comments down below on what you think about the movie and my analysis of it. Thank you all for stopping by my channel, Film Obsessed. If you want to see more moving forward for me with regards to film and television, and you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe if you are new here and turn on that notification bell. I'm trying to build a film community on here, and your support would be greatly appreciated. That's a wrap, folks. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you all soon for the next video.